Μπορούμε σιγά σιγά να υποδεχτούμε την ομιλήτριά μας, η κυρία Κέλλη Sharman, η οποία είναι Γενική Διευθύντρια της ύψεν Ελλάδος. Έχει σπουδάσει όμως ιστορία στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Λονδίνου. Έχει διαγράψει μια εντυπωσιακή καριέρα στον τομέα της βιοτεχνολογίας και της φαρμακευτικής βιομηχανίας και η εμπειρία της αποτελεί παράδειγμα για το πώς η ιστορία και οι ανθρωπιστικές επιστήμες μπορούν να ενισχύσουν τη διαχείριση και την ηγεσία σε ένα τεχνοκρατικό τομέα όπως η υγεία. It is with great pleasure that we welcome Ms. Kaylee Sharman, General Manager of Ipsen Greece, who will present on the paradox of a historian in the healthcare sector. Ms. Sharman, with a background in history from the University of London, has built an impressive career in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries, holding leadership positions at a multinational level. Her experience serves as a prime example of how history and the humanities can enhance leadership and management in a highly technical field such as healthcare. We eagerly anticipate your talk and to hear your experience. Without further ado, I hand over the stage to Ms. Sharman. Thank you so much for coming.
Ευχαριστώ και γεια σας. Δυστυχώς η ελληνικά μου δεν είναι πάρα πολύ καλά. Θα μετάφω στα αγγλικά για αυτήν την παρουσίαση μου. So thank you so much for the invitation this afternoon, and I'm sorry that I have to switch to English for this presentation, but hopefully you can follow what I'm talking about. So it's really a pleasure to be here amongst the faculty this afternoon and to have this opportunity to speak with you. And you'll see that the presentation is about the paradox of a historian in healthcare. But actually I should have added a parenthesis here to say, and why there should be more of us. Because I hope that by the end of this talk this afternoon, and I know we have a mixed bag of backgrounds and people here as well, but you'll feel as passionately as I do that a background in history can serve so well across so many different industries, including and perhaps even especially in healthcare. So thank you so much for the very kind introduction, but you're probably really wondering kind of who I am. So let me talk a little bit around... Oh, bravo. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, as you've been introduced, my name is Callie, and full disclosure, indeed, I'm a historian. Well, actually, historian is maybe a bold word. I'm at least somebody who has studied history. And worse than that, I'm married to an archaeologist. That's right. He is a specialist in ancient, well, actually Bronze Age Greece and Near East. So you can just imagine the kind of nerdy conversations that we have over dinner. And this, for those of you who don't recognize it, is Delphi, because my poor children then get dragged through museums and through various archaeological sites thanks to their rather unforgiving parents when it comes to this topic. So, with that in mind, I not only have a history degree, but I am the general manager for Ipsen, for Greece, Cyprus, Israel, and Malta. So I know that some of you here, hopefully at least, are familiar with us as an organization, but for those of you who aren't, Ipsen is an international biopharmaceutical company with its headquarters in France, and we have quite a rich legacy in Greece, actually. We've been here since 1979, not 1799, 1979. So I could talk to you a little bit around what we do and why that's important, but actually this afternoon I'm going to talk to you about something completely different. Because in the context of this Congress, actually what I'd like to share are some reflections of this journey from history to healthcare and why this background in history has served me so well in making various steps throughout this career. So maybe just to take a step back then. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with the details of my CV, hopefully at least, but maybe just taking a step back. So I studied history indeed. So I have a first from a university in the UK. And straight after my degree, saddled with debt, like most people, I suppose, I went to work in community and economic development. And because of my degree, I was asked whether I'd be interested in perhaps exploring academia. So I had a fantastic opportunity to spend 2 years actually living and working in Athens at the British School at Athens, the Britannique Scholi Archaeologie. I guess that many of you know it, just around the corner behind Evangelismos. So I lived and worked there for a couple of years as an intern. I realized quite quickly, unfortunately perhaps, that academia was not quite what I wanted to be doing forever. And I ended up, for very many different reasons, traveling to the Netherlands. And I rolled into a job with a company called Genzyme. And I guess that some of you might know your pharma history, others maybe not. So Genzyme used to be an independent biotechnology company specialized in rare diseases. And they had their European headquarters in the Netherlands. And so I rolled into a job in the European quality department. Now, obviously, I don't have a background in quality. I don't have any skills that would enable me, on paper at least, to go into a job in this sector at all. And at the time, Genzyme had a group full of amazing, amazing thinkers and scientists and physicians, but not that many people who could just get some projects done and some things organized. So I rolled into this role, and very quickly I got lent out to the Human Resources Department, where I spent a few years doing big organizational transformation projects and all sorts of other things. And from there, after Sanofi acquired Genzyme many years ago, I stayed in specialty care. And I went into a job running big projects at the European level from the headquarters. And I did lots of different things over very many different departments. And one of the projects that I did was around improving key opinion leader experience of us as a company. And for those of you who are physicians, and anyone who's ever tried to work with a pharmaceutical company to get contracts done or to get paid or to know what you're supposed to be doing, being contacted by 20 different people about the same event, I'm pretty sure that many of you know these pains, right? So we had this project to try and improve that experience. And I can't say that we've cracked the nut. I'm pretty sure that any of you who still work with companies will know that this is not probably any better than it was 10 or 20 years ago. But from that, I was able to work not just with the rare disease team that we had at the time, but also with the multiple sclerosis team, the neurology team. And so one day, the head of the European neurology team said to me, hey, have you ever thought about a job on the commercial side of the organization? And I said, what? You guys are the rock stars, surely, of the organization. I couldn't possibly, with a background like mine, never. And he said, that's right, we are the rock stars. No, he didn't really say that. He said, no, I think you'll learn. I think you'll learn on the job. And he gave me this opportunity to join the European team. And long story short, after a few years, I became, believe it or not, because I still don't know quite how, but responsible for one of our therapies at the European level. And I did many different steps in between. And my last role with Sanofi was as the head of oncology and hematology, covering Northern Europe. So Nordics, Baltics, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. So you're probably wondering, just like I am, how on earth this person with a degree in history ended up here. And then about 18 months ago, I joined Ipsen to become the general manager of Greece, Cyprus, Israel, and Malta. And here we are. So you're probably wondering, so why is this important, right? And here I want to say that careers like mine, with these squiggly lines, right, with this unclear path, doing different roles and different functions, they're really unusual in the healthcare sector, really unusual. And they are, I would say, almost unique for somebody with a background like mine. Because when you look on paper, even as I explain it to you guys now, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But even though I've always been the odd one out in pretty much any organization or team, I'm certainly almost, well, I would say exclusively the only historian or history graduate in the room. I'm almost always the only social science background in the room as well. Actually, I think that that's a bit of a superpower. Because what the study of history gives us, of course, and I know I'm preaching to the choir for many of you in the room as well, but it's a set of skills and capabilities that should be and are transferable across many different sectors and many different roles. And still, in this period of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we forget about diversity of thinking in the broadest possible sense. Because careers like mine shouldn't be the exception. Because there should be space for so many more backgrounds, for so much more diversity of thinking in organizations. Now, I realize in the healthcare sector, of course, there is a heavy bias on the science and medical side, and that makes perfect sense, right? We definitely wouldn't want a group of social sciences running the healthcare sector. But I think there's so much more opportunity to look more broadly about the types of profiles that we're looking for and what those individuals, particularly, I think, with a history background, can bring to the table. So what is it then that's really unique about history? Well, I think there are a few things. And I think the most important part is this reflex to truly understand and unpick what has happened before, to try to contextualize where we are now, and hopefully anticipate what happens next, or at least try to avoid the mistakes of the past as we think about where we are and where we go moving forward. And this particular lens is quite unique to history, I would say. On top of that, there are a set of skills and capabilities that are perhaps more broad, many of them from other types of degrees as well. So think about synthesizing, examining lots of complex information from many different sources, looking at information from a plethora of different perspectives, building a compelling argument, and not only that, but bringing something innovative, something new, asking those difficult questions, challenging the way that we think and the way that we believe we know what happened before and what it takes to move forward. And those skills, that way of thinking, that way of processing and analysing information, I realise is not specific to history, but I think those skills and capabilities in the context of this reflex to truly try to understand what happened before, to contextualise where we are and take a look at where we might go moving forward, I think that's pretty unique. And I think that that has a lot of benefits for the healthcare sector amongst many other sectors as well. And it's not just me who thinks so, because I asked AI. I asked Copilot in this case, and I asked, what do you think a history degree could mean for a job in the pharmaceutical or broader healthcare sector? And as you can see, even AI thinks it's a good idea to have a history degree in the healthcare sector. And I think that this is pretty compelling, right? These are pretty good reasons why you might want history graduates more broadly in any sector, but perhaps also within the healthcare sector. So then the question is, well, why does this really matter, right? What's important about this? And I guess in many ways, it doesn't. It doesn't, right? If you've studied history, that's great. There are many great skills and capabilities. There is a specific reflex and a way of thinking that could be beneficial to many different sectors, to many different industries, many different organizations and companies. And vice versa, as we talked around, for many of those skills and capabilities, actually those could be applied to different, to the healthcare sector as well, right? So if you do different types of degrees, different types of social science studies, for sure, you would have a similar set of skills and capabilities, hopefully, that you could apply in healthcare as well. But for me specifically, as we think about healthcare and the importance of the work that we do, actually, I think that we could do with taking more time to really understand what's gone before, to understand where we are right now, and to look at where we might go from here. And when I think about the purpose that at least gets me up every morning, right, it's about making sure that the right patient is getting onto the right therapy at the right time. And to do that, we have to look back. We have to take a look at what we did before, what we're doing right now, and what we can do differently and even better next time around, every single day. Because what we do is too important not to do that, right? It's too important. And by having that reflex, by making sure that we actually check ourselves, it's not only really important for the way that, for example, I lead teams, or I think about people or organizations or strategy, right? You can't have a strategy without understanding where you've come from or where you might be right now or where you might need to go moving forward. But it's important for the very purpose that we serve. Because if we want to continue to innovate, if we want to continue to drive the best possible care for our patients, we have absolutely got to look back in order to look forward. And what better way to do it than through the lens of a historian? So I'm going to stop there maybe and just end with a couple of reflections. So firstly, again, I realise that this is perhaps slightly curveball perspective for a congress like this, but I really hope that you leave, as I mentioned right at the beginning, with the firm belief that not only healthcare, but many other industries as well, could really benefit from taking a broader look at the profiles that they are bringing into organizations, to look beyond our own biases as we think about particular sectors or particular types of roles, to take a chance on different types of people, different types of backgrounds, and in particular, in the case of historians, maybe add one or two more history graduates to any sector that we work in. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Are there any questions? Should we go on with our talks? Yes, please. Vavels.
To all these insightful thoughts you gave us, and there are two more things. It would be nice if politicians and in general governments were also historians. That would have been great.
My husband is a historian.
Yeah, exactly. He's not in the room, unfortunately,
too, so.
But I think we'd be aligned on our thinking.
He's the Minister of Health, and he's a historian.
Exactly.
I mean, your house is not world leader. I mean, world leaders need. The second thing is, as you traveled a lot.
Do you want me to debate on that? Okay, good.
Perhaps tell us if your history background helped you understand or acclimate yourself better to the locations where you were, if you were able to perceive the popular sentiment about various things, about their neighbors, about Europe, about the world, if that helped you in understanding better, you know, the mindset of the people you were around.
Yeah, absolutely. So good question. Look, I think it's perhaps a combination of things, right? It's probably very much a bit of personality, but also really this background. There's a reason I studied history. I was passionate about it. And maybe before I come back to your question, I think that this is the point, right? So if you have, you know, friends, relatives out there, kids, I have my own kids, right, who will be thinking in a few years' time about what they might want to study. And with the defunding of social sciences and the devaluation of these types of profiles, actually I think it's more important than ever that we encourage young people to study the things that they are passionate about. Because in the end, we should want to study to learn how to learn to be curious, to learn to ask questions, to learn to analyze and synthesize and build arguments, right? And it shouldn't really matter what you've studied, because thankfully these days, there are not that many careers where you tend to stay, and medicine is perhaps an exception here, and there are others too, but in one career or one job for the rest of your days. And so I think it's even more important that we have this dialogue, really to think about what is it, when we think about EQ over IQ, for example, right? How do we have those discussions to make sure that we're casting the net wide and that we really are creating a generation of independent critical thinkers and using those skills and applying them in many different jobs and sectors. So that I would say is as part of it. And in terms of your question whether having this background has helped as I've moved around and changed jobs, absolutely, right? Because I think one of the great things about having studied history, and again, maybe it's part degree but part the natural curiosity, but when you take a look back and when you try to really understand and unpick what has happened before, it does tell you about how we ended up here. It helps to tell you something about the context of where we are right now and what the future might hold. And I'm not saying it's crystal ball looking, right? But at least to try to anticipate a little bit what might be some of that undulation that we see in history. And more than that, really trying to learn from the past so we don't repeat the same mistakes. You know, and I think we're maybe slightly controversially, but we're in the middle of a crisis in the Middle East, right? You have to understand the context of all of the history to understand how we got here and what might happen in the future. And I think that curiosity you can apply to, you know, many different areas. And I think it's really important for anybody to try to understand and walk a few steps in somebody else's shoes to understand where they've been, where they are, and where they might go.
First, I'd like to tell you that I'm happy you were devoted to this title, because it's very important you detailed this beautifully well here. And first, you touched the issue of scientific curiosity. For a physician, it's very important to have and keep always scientific curiosity. Why this happens, why it will not happen, what's going to happen later. And you have developed this very well by studying, you know, the British school, etc. The other things that I always thought about the medical science, that the most important knowledge is what is between the principles, between the different specialties, between the different scientists, between what we do here today, which is between the classic studies and what you consider in medicine, because we have some secrets that we learn from everyday practice we have to share with you, and you have certain things to tell us. Personally, I love history, so I'm more interested than anybody else, but I'm happy that you said this, you detailed this very, very well. Thank you.
And maybe just on that reflection, you know, one of the most fundamental things I think that you do as a physician is you look first at your patient history, right?
Yeah.
It's really fundamental to what you do. So everyone is doing it in this room, right? You look first at what happened, what is the story of that patient? and you take it from there. The same reflex.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad that we found a way to have you here with us and listen to all your journey. And what I would like to pinpoint two things. One is that I believe that we have to disconnect learning and education from an actual job. It's not the meaning of learning and education to make you appropriate for a certain position. And that's why I believe that it's very important to have people from different backgrounds in every space, as you so well described. And the other thing is that exactly having a background in history or classics really helps you see the present in a completely different way. I have to say that I'm not that educated in this sense. I have not read as much as I would have liked, and I'm not an historian. I have good friends that try to make me better, but I think it's a skill that a lot of us lack, and in the sense of it, this is why we're trying to be better and ameliorate ourselves, and at the same time show that there are no boundaries in this sense. We have boundaries in other sense, but I believe that everybody can really have a position anywhere, and he or she will be better as far as he or she is more educated.
Absolutely, I can agree more.
Thank you very much for your excellent talk. I want to say that medicine is not only a science, it is an art. So the relation with you, the close relation with you, and the close relation with history and philosophy and the Greek, all this that we heard today, I think that helps to keep, to conserve, and to continue with the medical art. That is a very important issue that we have lost in the recent years.
Absolutely, thank you.
However, I have some questions. How a historian can manage with human resources or some very peculiar logistic drills like clawback and so on? I think that you need a special education for that.
So look, it's a good point, right? So maybe a couple of things. Firstly, I wouldn't consider myself a historian in that sense, since I'm not a professional historian, right? I am a graduate of history. Maybe I'd like to think of myself as a historian, but I'm not, just to manage expectations. And you're right, but I think coming back to the point that was raised earlier on, I think and it's not true for history, I think it's true for many other degrees as well. When you study, it should be about learning how to learn. And as long as you have the curiosity to learn how to learn, and as long as you want to continue on that journey, I think that there are so many things that you can learn on the job, from experience, and as long as you have a good foundation of those skills and capabilities, which are so transferable in many different degrees these days, why not? Why should we limit our thinking and limit what our children, what the next generation is going to do? I think it's so important to cast the net wide.
And learn how to learn, it means that education does not drive necessarily to specialization. Education has a value by itself, which is it teaches you how to learn. And the second thing I wanted to say is that what we're talking all day long today here, what we're talking about, is that, and it's good that because we neglected a bit history, which is a very important, yeah, it's a very important, no, we talked about philosophy, okay, in one day you cannot, fortunately, you introduced history in the music. And music, yeah. Oh, sorry, okay. No, I didn't forget it because it was one of the best. No, finally, what we get when we go back, whether in history, whether in classics, whether in philosophy, is we put our own world in perspective. So we have the opportunity to see its shape, and otherwise we cannot see its shape. We see an informal and, how do you say, kind of floating situation. You mentioned the Middle East. Well, you have to put that in perspective and see how it started, and that's the only way to see, to be able to judge what's happening. Maybe you will be wrong, but you have the opportunity to judge it. Yeah. That's what I wanted to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.